Hi, everybody. Welcome back again to the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. Can you see? Is the palm tree still obstructing the view of the podium? Okay, good. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this wonderful reading that we have in store for us. And I just want to introduce Denise Duhamel, who will introduce Tom Lux before he reads. And then after Tom is concluded, we'll take a short 5 or 10 minute break. And then we'll come back and Marilyn Nelson will read. And then there will be book signings in the Ocean Breeze room. Just wanted to make those administrative announcements. Thank you. Denise Duhamel's most recent poetry titles are Two and Two, and Me et un Sentiment, and Queen for a Day Selected and New Poems. She is an associate professor teaching poetry at Florida International University in Miami, and it's a great pleasure to have her here with us this evening. Denise Duhamel.
Thank you, Miles. It is my great pleasure to introduce Thomas Lux this evening. For those of you who have never heard Tom read before, let me start off by telling you, you are in for the treat of your poetry life. For those of you who have heard Tom read before, I know you are anxious for me to sit down and for him to get up to the mic, so I will be brief and get on with it. While Tom is most famous for his 27 years of hard work at Sarah Lawrence College, I first met Tom at Emerson College in 1984 when I was an undergraduate in the BFA Creative Writing program. That year, Tom was the very young, very hipster visiting poet. His class, he's still very young and very hip, but he was really very young back then. His classes were completely eye-opening to me. Tom's line-by-line, word-by-word, syllable-by-syllable critiques were both feared and loved by his students. I remember taking Dennis Leary's class. Before he was a famous comedian, he was a part-time teacher at Emerson, and Tom's class the same semester. And I can vouch that Tom could do with repetition and closure in a poem what Dennis could do with setup and taglines in his routine. In 1984, I had no idea what an MFA program was. Not many of us did, but Tom encouraged me to apply to Sarah Lawrence, and there he continued to inspire all his students by his poems, his wit, his dedication, and his prowess on the softball field. Rarely is a gifted teacher and program coordinator also as gifted a poet as Tom. But of course, Tom's poems themselves are his most important lesson to his students. Tom's poems are in many ways like a stand-up routine, if comics were also makers of beautiful and intense language. Tom's poetry is particularly fitted to stand-up, a lone, peculiar voice intimately dispensing information. He heightens tensions with his line breaks, incorporates wordplay, misunderstandings, and surprise. When FIU, where I teach, had an open mic poetry night shortly after 9/11, I read Tom's poem, The People of the Other Village, the first poem that I turned to after the terrorist attacks. Tom's poems are funny kinds of poems that can scare the hell out of you, as they often speak to frightening and startling truths. Tom's books include The Cradle Place, The Street of Clocks, New and Selected Poems 1975 to 1995, The Blind Swimmer, Early Selected Poems 1970 to 1975, and Split Horizon, for which he received the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. He has been a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Award in Poetry, and he has received 3 National Endowment for the Arts grants and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Tom is now the Bourne Chair in Poetry and the director of the McEver Visiting Writers Program at the Georgia Institute of Technology. He has said, "Poetry's great power is its ability to make us more human and alive, less alone, to offer solace and insight and healing, even if only a little." I would counter that Tom's poetry does just that, but not only a little. Tom's poetry does that a lot. Please help me welcome Thomas Lux.
Thank you, Denise. That was really sweet. That was very thoughtful, and thank you. And it has been a long time. I think Denise might be the only student I've ever worked with at 2 different colleges anyway, as an undergraduate and a graduate student at different colleges. I'm going to read one poem from the new and selected poems. I was talking about Miles when I first met Miles, and he came to the graduate program at Sarah Lawrence, and one of the first times I met him, I noticed he was driving a Bentley. So I said, Miles, you can't be a poet and drive a Bentley. You got to drive a junk car like all the rest of us. He didn't take that advice. He took other advice from me. In fact, he's got a new Bentley out there now. But at Sarah Lawrence, not only was he a wonderful poet and just a great person to get to know, but he was incredibly generous to all the kids, all the younger people, helping kids out of trouble, giving them a lawyerly kind of advice, things like that. It's just, you really missed there, Miles. And this is an extraordinary thing. This is a beautiful venue for a reading like this and this kind of festival, and this thing is going to thrive. I know it. I also want to... I also want to say, this doesn't happen every day, but there are two indisputably, inarguably great American poets here tonight, and they are Galway Kinnell and William Meredith. Very rarely... very rarely does you get that kind of luck to be in a room with two great poets at the same time. Galway was one of the poets, and Mr. Meredith as well, that made me want to try to do this myself. So it's really nice that you're here. And I'd never met Mr. Meredith before, and it was a pleasure. I'm going to read one poem from this selected poems called "He Has Lived in Many Houses." He has lived in many houses, rooms, flats, a hayloft, a tent, motels, under a table, under an overturned rowboat, a villa, briefly, but not, as yet, a yurt. In these places he has slept, eaten, put his forehead to the window glass, looking out. He's in a stilt house now, the water passing beneath him half the day. The other half, it's mud. The tides do this. They come, they go, while he sleeps, eats, puts his forehead to the window glass. He's moving soon, his trailer to a trailer park or to the priory to live among penitents, but in his own cell with wheels. To take him when it's time to go to houseboat with a little motor, putt, to take him across the sea or down the river where at night, anchored by a sandbar at the bend, he will eat, sleep, and press his eyelids to the window of the pilot house until the anchor hauling hour, when he'll embark again toward his sanctuary, harborage, saltbox, home. I'm going to read one poem from another book called The Street of Clocks. It's called The Language Animal. That's what the ancient Greeks called themselves, called us, called human beings, the language animal. Because he can speak, because he can use his words, whole headfuls of them, he gives everything names, even things that call themselves forever something else. Because he can speak, he can efficiently lie or obscure with such brilliance a listener with less language is glad to lose more of it. Because he can speak, he will be lonely, because those who speak back speak another language of other derivations. Because he can speak, he speaks. Because he can speak, he can pray out loud. Because he can speak, the predators are drawn to him in the night. Because he can speak, he invented the ear, then too, to better hear himself speak. Because he can speak, he thought he could sing. Because he can speak, he has one more thing to do besides searching for food or hiding so as not to be food. Because he can speak, he draws a full breath and speaks in sentences, each one beginning with a large letter and ending with a period, or the soon-to-be invented marks that indicate bewilderment and awe. I remember what I was going to say now, which is going to make me out to be further of a kind of an in-grade or something like that. But you don't have to clap after every poem. Billy Collins, I heard him say once, it's like you're hearing each one of your poems judged as you're reading them, and you're reading the fourth poem and you're thinking they didn't clap that much at the second poem, and it's a relatively new thing. In recent years, this happens sometimes. It used to be always, you'd clap at the end like you do at anything else. If you want to clap for the other poets after each poem, that's fine. But if you want to clap for me, save it for the end. It'll save some time. It'll be more time for a couple more poems. Those were probably Sarah Lawrence people. I'm going to read a couple poems from this most recent book called, Jesus Christ, The Cradle Place. I'm stone dead sober, too. This is called To Help the Monkey Cross the River. To help the monkey cross the river, which he must cross by swimming for fruits and nuts, to help him, I sit with my rifle on a platform high in a tree, same side of the river as the hungry monkey. How does this assist him? When he swims through it, I look first upriver. Predators move faster with the current than against it. If a crocodile is aimed from upriver to eat the monkey, and an anaconda from downriver burns with the same ambition, I do the math, algebra, angles, rate of monkey, croc, and snake speed, and if it looks as though the anaconda or the croc will reach the monkey before he attains the river's far bank, I raise my rifle and fire 1, 2, 3, even 4 times into the river just behind the monkey to hurry him up a little. Shoot the snake, the crocodile, they're just doing their jobs. But the monkey has little hands like a child's, and the smart ones in a cage can be taught to smile. That was in a magazine. Somebody wrote to the editor of the magazine who sent me the letter saying monkeys never learn no monkeys swim unless they're taught to do so by human beings. And my only thought was, not even in poems? You can have a monkey swimming in a poem if you want? And then somebody sent me a thing that there is one kind of monkey that can swim and does swim all the time, and it's that monkey with the big nose, the proboscis monkey. This is a little prose poem. I haven't written prose poems for many years. They were quite common in the 70s, say, but this is a little one. I've tried a few recently. It's called Letter to Walt Whitman from a soldier he nursed in Armory Square Hospital, Washington, D.C., 1866. Most of you probably know Whitman spent a lot of time nursing Union soldiers, and many hundreds of whom died in his arms, etc. He wrote letters for them. He'd give them candy and fruit and stuff like that, hold their hand at night when they were dying often. And this is a letter from one of the soldiers who did survive and is writing to Walt Whitman. Dear Walt, kind uncle, it's near 2 years since I left Armory Square, and I'm home now. The corn grew good this summer, and we bought 2 cows. My leg ain't right still, but it's still my leg. When you promised they wouldn't take it, it was the first time after the grape shot I didn't want to go to the world where there is no parting. Dear Uncle, we have had a son born, and we call him Walter Whitman Willis. He is well and bright as a dollar. Yours affectionately, Bill Willis. A few of the phrases in there were taken right from a letter that he had actually gotten. It's what kind of broke his health, his own health, those years. I'll read one more poem from this book called To Plow and Plant the Seashore. His tractor rattles down the dunes, low tide. It's time to plow the seashore and then follow with the finer harrow blades to comb this rich earth smoother. The bits of shell and weed will contribute to the harvest. He's not been farming long. See, he has all his fingers to their tips. No, he's not been farming long. Now his field is ready and it's time to plant his seeds in earth through which he's pulled his farmer's tools. This year, it's corn. He loves the little yellow crowns. Yes, this year it's corn, the farmer thinks. Last year the soybeans didn't take and the yield was minus beans, i.e. the seed beans too were gone. Corn will love this rich and muddy ground and grow in rows over his long but thin 2 acres. That's what they gave the farmer, 2 acres, a tractor with his partners, and that little house in the blue-green seagrass above the field. Also 4 chickens. They gave him 4 chickens and a hammer and a pitchfork. This is what they gave him, and he was glad for it and for his title, farmer. His fields are tilled. Someday he'll have a daughter and a son. By morning, the farmer thinks, the shoots will be up an inch or 2. The wronged one is always the wrong one. And I want to read some newer poems. This is called The Republic of Anesthesia. I don't feel anything today, my countrymen and women. I'm numbed by 21 liters of Novocaine. I feel nothing from my cowlick to the final ridge of my big toe's nail. My tear ducts dry-walled, not a sob or the sigh of an ant left in me this autumn. Another autumn in which the world hates itself so much. Man ties severed head of another man to the tail of a dog. One frog eats a smaller frog. Wisdom teeth, instead of being yanked, evolve to wisdom fangs. All day, arid hair-splitting, cheese-paring. One bank buys another bank, and the little rubber thimble on the teller's thumb, that stays the same. Certainly my God can rip the heart from your God's chest, and will, God willing, with my help. A 1,000,000,000,000 milligram hammer, the arc of its swing as wide as a ring of Saturn, hits us first on the right temple, then on the left. Good night, lights out, bark the stars. Some of my poems are going a little more towards allegory, I would say. I've always been interested in metaphor, but some seem to be tipping over into allegory, and I don't know exactly what the difference is or where the line is, but this would be one of the poems that I would put in that category of a little more allegorical. It's called The Shooting Zoo. The Shooting Zoo. The giraffe can't stand up anymore. He's still tall, but not tall enough. The silverback is bald. The zebra's black stripes gray. There's a virus at the zoo. The springbok can't prong, the alligator's racked by cataracts, the last lion meows like an auntie's cat. The penguins walk around like they have a load in their pants. The vultures are eating sandwiches and plants. Something's wrong with all the animals. The pandas obstreperous, the iguanas demand bananas, the loons are out of tune. What to do, what to do? Soon, whatever it is that's deranging them will pass through their bars across their moats, and then our dogs and goldfish, the little parakeet who pecks our lips so we may think it's kissing us, soon they'll stop dropping too. Next, Grandma, our children, the zookeepers don't know what to do. So, print some permits permitting men to bring their guns to the shooting zoo. This one's called the Happy Majority. It has an epigraph from P.T. Barnum that goes, "Before I joined the great, and I believe the happy majority," and he's referring to the dead as the happy majority. And the poem takes a little issue with that statement. "Before I joined the happy majority, though I doubt one member happy nor one unhappy, I have some plans to discover several new species of beetle, to jump from a 100-foot platform into a pile big enough to break my fall of multicolored lingerie, to build a little heater, oh, not to join the happy ones until some tasks are done, beside each tulip bulb to speed its bloom, to read 42,007 books, list available by request, to learn to read and or write Chinese, CAT-scan, Sanskrit, petroglyphs, and English, to catch a bigot, oh, not to join the happy ones until some tasks are done, by the toe, to kiss the clavicle of, name available by request, to pay my respects again at the grave of John Keats, to abrogate my position in God's nihilistic, oh, not to join the happy ones until some tasks are done, dream, to hold my mother's hand as she leaves this world, to lay my hand upon my father's heart as he does likewise, and my daughter to be glad I was her father, as I exit also in 100 years or so from the consciousness to the un. I had an editor for many years at Houghton Mifflin. Many of my friends, colleagues here knew him, Peter Davison, and he was just very kind to me, and I wrote a kind of an elegy for him. He was a poet. He was one of the few poets who didn't teach. He worked as an editor and a publisher, man of letters. He was very kind to me. And this poem is called "The Gentleman Who Spoke Like Music," for Peter Davison. The gentleman who spoke like music was kind to me, though he did not have to be, who brought into the world 1,000 books, right there, a life well lived, who wrote a dozen or so himself, some prose about others, some his own poems, right there, a well-lived life, who corrected my spelling gently, and history, too, who once or twice a year would buy me lunch and later let me leave his office with shopping bags of books to read, who wore a bow tie sometimes and a vest, I think even a hanky in his jacket pocket, who was generous to me, the gentleman who spoke like music, who was kind to me, though he did not have to be. This is called Her Hat, That Party on Her Head. I saw first and only her hat. I saw neither face nor shoulder, no lawn or garden nearby, no white tablecloth, champagne flutes, or trays of treats pierced by toothpicks that fit with her hat at this place. a side street, in a village, in a country across a border. Looking with bad directions for a bus brought me here. Behind a rectory, a priest in his robe read a newspaper, leaning back in a chair with his bare feet on the table. I've never seen such white feet. I saw also dust, stained laundry on lines, 2 roosters, some sagging wires hung above. Then, on the other side of a fence, her hat rising and dropping with each step. She walked the fence's length and disappeared. She returned and walked the fence again. She was walking a circuit, Payne's little looping course. She walked slowly, and too often her head tipped forward, her eyes cast down beneath the garden, the birthday party on her head. Who is gone so long from her? Beneath the bougainvillea and the lily, beneath fuchsia's little lamps, beneath the yellows and greens and blues, whose absence made her wear this hat to help but fail to let this absence go? This is a poem called the Ambrosiana Library. That's sort of the ideal library, or as I see an ideal library. Ambrosia, the food of the gods. The Ambrosiana Library. On its onyx shelves, every book you've ever read, and the tone you felt, which pierced you when you did. Even those you've forgotten you've read. It offers all the books you want to read, and all the books you don't know you want to read because you've never read about them in your reading. It holds also those as yet unwritten. The Ambrosiana Library is comprehensive. Every book ever written on monkeys, a mile or 2, all told on shelves. Also, every truthful book written by the monkey's cousins, some several yards of these on special shelves, more like cradles or thrones. Every book on joy, TAL's got it. Every book on bananas. The Ambrosia Library has long, deep polished oak tables, green lampshades, cream-cushioned chairs with, for anyone planning to read more than 3 hours, magic fingers, leather armrests for those who read with chin in hands, magazines in 11,000 languages, every obscure, passionate poetry journal, every book on everything we don't want to know but should. The lights hanging from the oak beams above the reader's light and illuminate each page. Each book dusted each day. Original jackets, no odious numbers glued to spines, not one decimal, Dewey or otherwise, in the entire place. Each reader is assigned his or her personal librarian, and each librarian is paid twice the average income of orthopedic surgeons and gets free orthopedic surgery for any Ambrosiana-related shelving or unshelving injury. Mornings, whole afternoons, citizens sit and read themselves into another world from which they will return. When it's time for lunch or to close, a tiny bell is rung, which only humans, but not dogs, can hear. And at the door, as you leave, is a character you loved, fictional, historical, half of each, from whatever book you're reading now, or from any book read previously. This character, never the writer of the book, though there are slips of paper with the words "thank you" and the author's name on them. Monthly, these slips released to the wind from a skylight in the library's attic. This character stands by the door to say goodbye, come again. Tip of his hat, a smile from her. No books ever leave Ambrosiana. It's a library you enter like a book, and when you leave, the book leaves inside of you. Now, it came up yesterday talking, and again, Tony mentioned it today, the things that boys do, the cruel things that boys do at some point in their life. I mean, every guy in this room threw stones at frogs when they were kids at one time or another. And this is my version of that. It's called Toad on Golf Tee. First, I sought a toad in the rubble-filled ring of a gone silo cement foundation. They like to hide and hop there. Once acquired, I took him to a spot just to the peachless peach trees left, a slightly down-sloping patch of lawn. I teed him up sideways. I wanted to launch him by the ribs toward my target, a steep barn roof 40 yards away, over a driveway, a rock garden, over more asphalt, and a short swatch of bad grass. For this, I'd use a 9-iron. I needed lift, and if the toad landed where I wanted him to land, just short of the roof's peak, then he will roll back down. Reusable, reteeable toad. My short game was good. The weather vane's rooster said the wind was right. The sound, for I kept my backswing slow and my eye on the toad, fired to my face. Thwomp! It was a perfect pitch shot. He dropped inches from the top, rolled a few turns earthward, and stopped. Within a week, his disarticulated bones slid down the sharp slope and landed in the little valley the rain excavates when it falls, too, from the eaves. Now, that kid did a stupid, kind of cruel thing, but he had to watch for a whole week. He had to see that thing, and then finally it's just bones and it rolls down the barn roof. I didn't really do that. I actually used a driver. I'm going to read 2 more poems. This is called Early Blur. Early blur occurs, I say to Mary, when we catch the outline of something and think we know it, and then we fill in the parts we don't see with hope. I say this to Mary, Mary of the light slant of light of autumn, Mary of the lake of wolverines, Mary of the lake beneath which drowned a wall, Mary of the first snow. I say to Mary, I say, I am the river, and you are its blue, burning current. And I want to finish with a very new poem. I wanted to try it out. It's called God Particles, a hyphenated word, God Particles. God explodes, supernovas, and down upon the whole planet a tender rain of him falls on every cow, ladle, leaf, human, axe handle, swing set. We rush from our houses, farmers standing saved in the rain after years of drought. Like snowflakes, each God particle is different, though unlike snowflakes, are warm and do not melt, but are absorbed by the skin. Every human, every creature, rock, tomato on earth is absorbing God. Who just asked, why did God explode? And why ask this far into the story? I believe he did it to himself. Nobody walks into God's house, his real house on a hill in Beulah land. Nobody walks into his house wearing a suicide belt. No plane flies high enough to drop a bomb on his house. No one can trespass against him and booby-trap his lawn. Why did God do it? Guilt because he sent his son to do a job he should have done himself? I don't think so. God knows there's no reason for God to feel guilt. I think he was downhearted, weary, too weary to be angry anymore, vengeful, or even forgiving. And he wanted each of us and all the things we touch and are touched by to have a tiny piece of him, though we are unqualified of even the crumb of a crumb. Thank you very much.